Welcome. If we've not met before, my name's Adam. I'm our lead pastor here, and I just want to say this right off the bat. Man, we are a brand new church here. This is like week 12 for us, so everything is new, and it's like kids at Christmas love it. But one of my favorite weekends ever just happened last weekend with our first ever Easter weekend. And what I want to do before we move on, I could go off on Easter for a long time and all the things I loved about it, but I just want to say thank you to all of our volunteers around here who helped make Easter just unbelievable. And I'm going to ask you to help me do that. If you guys would thank our volunteers and get loud enough so the ones down in kids ministry can hear us right now. All right, guys, give it up for all of our volunteers around here. We just had an incredible Easter, and everything about it was just like, man, it's who we want to be. It's what we had envisioned, and bigger than that, what God envisioned for this church to be as we planted. And so on Easter, we're kind of playing off of what we talked about last week. I'm going to catch you up real quick on where we're going today. On Easter, we looked at this idea that the birthplace of hope, think about this, the birthplace of hope is a grave. The birthplace of hope is a grave because that grave was empty. The birthplace of hope is a grave because that grave was empty. And if the tomb was empty on Easter, then we looked at this idea. Anything's possible. So for people who have misunderstood what hope means along the way, for people barely hanging on to hope, for those who have given up on hope entirely, if the tomb is empty, then anything's possible, right? Now, on Easter, we were all high-fiving, fist-bumping, going, yeah, like Jesus died for us and he walked out of the grave. We can walk out of the grave as well, and it was awesome. But then Monday hit, didn't it? And we're going, man, like what is going on? Or in my case, like in ministry, we call it like the post-weekend hangover. I wasn't literally hungover, okay, so don't judge me on that. But it was the post-Easter hangover combined with anxiety and Monday and whatever that looks like. But then I start asking questions like this, and maybe you do too. Is anything really possible? Like, Jesus, can you really do the things that you promised to do in my life? And what does this look like? And so that's why we're kicking off this brand new series called Rebuilt. That if the grave is empty, if anything is now possible, what is now possible and how is it now possible if Jesus walked out of the grave? What happens in our lives when we come close with Jesus? He just invited us to come and see, to come experience him, to come be up close with him. What happens as he works in our lives and we become the people that he created us to be? How does all that work? So let me ask a question on the surface, and don't overthink it. What needs to be rebuilt? If you just think in general, what needs to be rebuilt? Broken things, right? Like if something's already completely whole, it does not need to be rebuilt. Broken things need to be rebuilt. And I promised you all I would stop talking about this a couple weeks ago. I'm going to bring it up again because as I wrote this message, I'm looking out my back window at my backyard that used to exist before the tornado that went through Springdale went right through our backyard. And I'm like, my backyard is a mess. It needs to be rebuilt. It is broken. And so broken things are what need to be rebuilt, right? But what about when that's our life, right? What about when our lives need to be rebuilt? Or our marriages need to be rebuilt, or our identity needs some rebuilding, or our health issues that we're facing? What do we do when we are the ones that need to be rebuilt? See, leading up to Easter in Hope City, this is just what I want to tell you about the type of church that we are becoming. I got tons of messages through social media based on some Facebook and Instagram ads that we ran leading up to Easter, and it was all full of questions like this. People going, hey, I just want you to know I'm a broken person. Can I come to your church? Is someone like me allowed to be part of your community? Because I think a lot of us, we've learned along the way that the church isn't a safe place for people who have broken, messy, sometimes jacked up lives. And in fact, it goes so much so that I think our experience in the church maybe doesn't even match up with what Jesus would say about the church, that the purpose of the church is to be a community for broken people. It's to be a community where broken people are being rebuilt by Jesus. And so when our experience doesn't match that, we have to take a hard look at that and go, what does it look like to actually be rebuilt by Jesus and not just be another church that's just kind of out there floating along and not being the community that Jesus is calling us to be. So over these next 3 weeks, we're going to look at what does it mean to be rebuilt by Jesus? What does it mean to be rebuilt from our brokenness? What does it mean to be rebuilt with boldness? What does it mean to be rebuilt for a calling in our lives? And over these next 3 weeks, we're going to look at 3 people who've had their lives rebuilt by Jesus. And as Jesus does this in their lives, he does something pretty incredible. He actually changes their names. He gives them a whole new identity along the way. And we've talked about this before, but your name, man, it's one of the most powerful identifying factors of who you are. And often when Jesus rebuilds us, he renames us. And so today what we're going to look at is rebuilt from brokenness. Rebuilt from brokenness. See, like that video said earlier, sometimes our sin or other people's sin or just this world, they all have a way of breaking us along the way, don't they? So to set this up, you may be going, Adam, you're going all ADD on us. Where are you going with this? I'm going to take one more detour, and then we're coming back together, okay? I'm going to play a little word association game here with us, all right? You guys know what that is? I'm going to say a word or a phrase, and you're going to repeat back the first thing that comes to mind. There are no wrong answers in this. You'll get it right away, but it's just kind of like you go with the gut feeling on this, all right? So if I say peanut butter, you say jelly. Awesome. You guys got it. Awesome. If I say basket, you say basketball. Yep, awesome. Around here in Arkansas, I've been in Bud Walton Arena where we chant this back and forth. If I say Arkansas, you say Razorbacks. There we go. Yeah, Arkansas Razorbacks. In Bud Walton Arena, it is unbelievable. We absolutely rock. I'm going to give you one more Arkansas one. Woo, pig, followed by. So there we go. We got it. And I've got kids. They're all like 7 and under, 2 boys. If I say under, you say underwear. Yes, thank you. You got it. How about this? Yeah. I love this back and forth talking. Maybe we should do this more. How about this? If I say church, ooh, that was a little harder, isn't it? Because there's a lot of things that we could say. How about if we played that word association game with someone who isn't a follower of Jesus yet? Somebody who's walking in here just trying to experience Jesus for the first time. What would they say? Church. Maybe hypocrites, right? Intolerant. Judgmental. Seems more like a country club than like a community of broken people. Or not relevant, doesn't apply to my life. Or most people, how about this? And maybe you felt this before. I just don't feel like I can't be myself in church. I can't really let them know who I am. If they really knew who I was, man, I don't know if I would be invited back here again. Anyone resonate with that? Me too. See, the problem when we talk about being rebuilt around church, 2 things kind of come up for us. One is, hey, you know what? I'm good. I don't need that. Jesus has already rebuilt me maybe, or, I'm not sure that Jesus thing is actually the rebuilding that I need. I don't have stuff going on in my life. I used to be a mess, but I'm not broken anymore. I don't have too much going on. Or how about this? I'm too far gone. I'm too broken. Is there actually hope for somebody like me because I feel like I'm beyond repair? Now, any of those definitions of the church, is that what Jesus said the church is supposed to be? Did it include any of those things when Jesus envisioned the church? See, I think in Jesus' mind, the church was never meant to be what we've made it. It was never meant to be a building or a time or a place or a community full of people that have all their stuff together. Instead, we are a community of people who are being rebuilt on the foundation of the good news that Jesus did indeed walk out of the grave on a day in history. And our faith is placed on that Jesus will keep all of his promises to us and what he promises to do in the future from this point on. So if the church was never meant to be what we do, we go to church. Church is actually instead supposed to be who we are. It's the community that we're part of. The church is meant to represent Jesus and what he is to the world. And coming here on Sundays is just one of the ways that we do that, out of many ways that we do that. So today, you guys with me so far? Good? Okay. Today there's a lot of stuff that we could talk about when it comes to being rebuilt in the context of the church. There are a lot of definitions we could look at, but if the church is us, if the church is a community, we are the church, then what I want to do is move us beyond talking about it, and I want to move us to experience it. I want to experience what it looks like to take a step to be a community that's being rebuilt by Jesus. And I want to take a step towards becoming the community that I think Jesus is calling us uniquely at Hope City to be. I don't want to just talk about it anymore. I want to experience it. So hang on to that for a minute. Because the reality is we all come in here with different experiences, don't we? We all carry some baggage. And when we talk about brokenness, our heads go to different places. And Jesus is rebuilding us. But we all have scars. We all have wounds. We all have struggles. We all have sin, right? Which means this. When you show up in church, you're showing up in a community full of broken people. And here's the deal. Broken things can't rebuild themselves, can they? As much as I stare out at my backyard and I go, man, I wish that backyard was rebuilt and I didn't have to do anything about it. Broken things can't rebuild themselves, can they? Which means that it takes something greater than us to rebuild us when we're broken. And what I found around the church is the longer that we've been around, and the longer that you're around church, man, we get really good at hiding the broken parts of our lives, don't we? We get really good at pretending like there's nothing that needs to be rebuilt. And so what happens is someone else shows up with wounds and scars and brokenness, and instead of welcoming them with open arms like we were welcomed in to begin with, we tend to put up our guard and pretend like we got it all together. Or worse, we point fingers. Why? Because their shame reminds us of our shame that we've been working really hard to hide. But what if? Man, what if we knew that we weren't alone in our struggles? What if we knew that the church really is a safe place for broken lives to be rebuilt? You know, what if we knew that someone else could actually say, I'm in the same boat around here? What if we didn't just say it from stage? What if we got to experience it? I mean, does that sound more like the church that maybe Jesus intended when he talked about the church? A place where broken people are being rebuilt. There's no more hiding. There's no more like, oh, I can't be this. I have to fake it when I show up here. Does that sound like the church that you want to be part of? Because in the next few minutes, I'm going to give us an opportunity. I'm going to take a risk here. You guys want to take a risk with me? Are you up for taking a risk? In the next few minutes, we're going to do something to experience that. One of our partner churches, Flatirons Community Church out in Colorado, they did this a few years ago, and we stole this idea from them. And man, can I just tell you, it is powerful. So I'm going to ask you to help me out here. We're going to play a song in a few minutes, and as that song plays, we're going to pass out some surveys. And there's a pin on your seat. And I'm going to ask you to take a look at that survey when we pass it here in a few minutes. And there's yes or no answers only. So what I'm going to ask you to do is just circle yes or no as you read a question, okay? Now, here's the deal. This is totally anonymous. Hear me. Anonymous, all right? Don't put your name on it. If you write your name on it, you've outed yourself, okay? Like, that's not on us, all right? Totally anonymous. Don't cheat off your neighbor. This is not your college final, okay? Like, you got to spread out in the room. If you even want to go to the arcade and do this, you can do that. But here's the deal. This is why I want your eyes on your own paper. These questions we're going to ask are going to feel very personal. And they're going to feel invasive, all right? They're going to feel intrusive. They're going to feel scary. We're going to ask some things where you're like, man, can I really tell them that in church? Is this a safe place for me to say that this is what I'm working through right now? And here's the deal. Some of these things may be things that you've never shared with anyone. So if you need to spread out, you can do that. What I'm going to ask you to do is would you extend some trust our direction? And I promise you that by the end of this, it'll all make sense, and you'll be glad that you went for it, you took a risk, and you were honest in this. And if it's too big of a risk to answer any question, you can pass, okay? You don't have to circle anything on that paper if it's too big of a risk. But what I'm going to ask you is please, 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 just be you. Man, just be you. You don't have to check your head, your heart, or the stuff that you've done at the door. You can bring it in here, and it's a safe place to work through that and get to experience Jesus. I promise you later it will be worth it if you'd be willing to have the courage to walk through it with us right now. So here in the next few minutes, we're going to play this song. They're going to pass the surveys. You're going to take that, yes or no, and then there's going to be some buckets passed that you can drop that back in. But can we take a step together today to move beyond just talking about being a community of broken people who are being rebuilt? Can we take a step and experience it? How we feeling? Anybody a little nervous about your answers? Yeah, I can tell by the nervous laugh. Me too, okay? I promise you it's going to be worth it here in a few minutes. And, man, thank you so much for being honest, for being vulnerable. Here's why we're all a little bit nervous, okay? Because we know our lives aren't perfect. We know that part of us needs to be rebuilt. And honestly, we would rather not think about that part of our lives because some of us, if you're like me, when I filled out my survey in the back, I'm looking at this, I'm like, I'm a mess, right? I am a mess, and I've walked through some stuff. And guess what? That's why we say around here, we are all in the same boat. You know what I love about Jesus? Man, he loves people, our mess and all. And he specializes in rebuilding broken lives. If you have your Bible or your phone, we're going to be in Matthew chapter 9 for the next few minutes. You could turn there. If you don't know where Matthew is or you haven't opened up a Bible before, you can just type in Google Matthew 9. It'll pull up, or it'll be up here on the screens here in a minute. But I want to give you a little bit of background on the book of Matthew. We taught out of this before, but I haven't really talked much about who Matthew is. The book of Matthew was written by a guy named, you guys want to take a guess? Matthew, right? You guessed it. The Bible names aren't super original when they come to naming books. We just kind of go, who wrote it? Let's call it that, all right? But Matthew was an eyewitness to Jesus' life. He's one of his closest friends while Jesus was here, and he wrote a book of the Bible. So you might be thinking, man, Matthew, this dude, he had it all together. The reality is when Jesus found Matthew, he was a wreck, like a train wreck, a hot mess, and his life needed to be rebuilt. So this is where we're going to pick up in Matthew chapter 9, verse 9. I think Jesus actually met Matthew way before this, but we're going to see what happens in Matthew's life as he starts to experience Jesus' work and Jesus starts to rebuild him. Verse 9, it says, as Jesus was walking along, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at his tax collector's booth, and he said to Matthew, follow me and be my disciple. Like, come take on my way of life. And so Matthew got up and he started following Jesus. Now, we've talked about this around here before, but I want to catch us up, make sure we're all on the same page. Tax collectors in this day, they were worse than the IRS. Like, I can't think of anybody that's like, oh, I love my IRS agent, right? Nobody says that, but the tax collectors of that day were so much worse, so much more hated because they sold out to the Romans to make money for Caesar. They were Jews who sold out on their own people, and then they would steal a little extra off the top for themselves. And so Matthew, he was on the Sea of Galilee, the Mark and the Luke account would tell us. And the way this worked, Matthew was probably collecting transit taxes where the fishermen would be coming in off the Sea of Galilee, and then they would have to pay Matthew some version of taxes, and then Matthew would steal from them, and that's how he would make his income. Most tax collectors in the Bible, when you read about them, you see a life of affluence, a life of being rich, and it's what they had stolen from people. Now, here's what's interesting. At this time, Jesus had two sets of brothers, Peter, Andrew, James, and John, who are all following him already. Guess what they did? They were fishermen on the Sea of Galilee in the same town that Matthew was in. So chances are Matthew, maybe the night before, maybe a week before, whatever, had literally stolen from 4 of Jesus' followers. Then all of a sudden, Jesus comes along and invites their enemy to come be in the same community as them. It would be like seeing the person that you can't stand walk through the door of Hope City and sit down, and Jesus goes, yeah, welcome. We're so glad that you're here. I mean, can you process that? The modern day equivalent is someone who just completely denies their faith and goes, man, I'm going to pledge allegiance to whatever enemy we have today, and I'm going to go over there. And it sounds extreme, but this is who Matthew is. He's an enemy of the Jews. He's an enemy of some of the people following Jesus at this time. So why in the world would Jesus ask Matthew to follow him? Well, it's because he wants to do for Matthew the same thing that he does in our lives. Like, Matthew's life is broken, and Jesus wants to rebuild him. See, Matthew's life was not what people had envisioned for him. Again, from the Mark and the Luke account of this story, we see that Matthew had a different name. His name was Levi. His parents had named him Levi, and in Jewish culture, this had some big connotations because the Levites were the line of family in Israel that became priests, which meant that basically Matthew's parents had aspirations that one day he would become a pastor. Priest just means bridge builder. It means connecting from where people are back to God. They wanted Matthew to make a spiritual, significant difference in people's lives. Instead, Matthew goes, I'm going to turn my back on all that. I'm going to run away, and I'm going to go steal from people. I'm basically going to become an enemy of my people. His life was very different than it was intended to be. Now, if you can imagine, some of you have been there, and you don't have to imagine too much. What tapes do you think ran through Levi's head based on where he came from and where he ended up? I'm a broken version of the man I was intended to be. Anybody ever had that? That's Matthew. And so verse 10, it says that when Matthew was invited to follow Jesus, he invites Jesus and his disciples to his home to be dinner guests, along with many other tax collectors and, man, I just love the way that the New Living Translation puts this, disreputable sinners, because that's all who would hang out with Matthew at that point. Nobody else would go around him. But when the Pharisees saw this, they asked Jesus' disciples, why does your teacher eat with such scum? See, the Pharisees, and we've talked about them around here, but these are like the church people. They wear the right clothes. They say the right things. They know all the rules, and they typically do a pretty good job of trying to follow all the rules, and you can't see through their rule following to any of the brokenness because they're pretty good at hiding it, but when they can't follow the rules, they either try to shove it in the background and hide it, or they make up rules for why they didn't follow the rules to begin with, and they see Jesus eating with people that make them uncomfortable, to say the least, right? See, the issue was the sins of these tax collectors and sinners. It was obvious. Everyone could see it. The Pharisees, they just gotten pretty good at hiding their brokenness. And they're pretty good at pointing fingers too. And so they would say things like this, hey, Jesus, if you really knew who these people were, you wouldn't be sitting down with them. You wouldn't be eating with them. Because Matthew, man, he just stole from me last week. And his other tax collector buddies, man, they bankrupted my family. That prostitute that you're eating dinner with, Jesus, if you knew what they had done and how many marriages they had wrecked, like, Jesus, I promise you, you would not be with them if you are the Son of God like you claim to be. Jesus, if you're a good religious person, you wouldn't show up with people like that. And some of you have felt this way in church before, right? You didn't fit in. You knew you had issues instead of being welcomed, and you felt judged when you walked in the door, and no one may have said anything to you directly. They actually didn't have to, did they? It was the sideways glances and the fact that no one talked to you. See, the church has historically somewhat been the opposite of a place where broken people are rebuilt. It's a place where we show up and pretend we have it all together, right? But then here's Jesus, and he's eating with those sinners. And as I say, those sinners, wherever your mind goes to, that's who Jesus is showing up with. And by eating with them, Jesus is actually saying, hey, you're my friend. You're my friend. Verse 12, when Jesus heard this, the Pharisees talking, he said, healthy people don't need a doctor. Who needs a doctor? Sick people do, right? And he said, now go learn this. Learn the meaning of this scripture. I want you to show mercy, not offer sacrifices. I want you to extend an open hand to people, not pretend you have it all together religiously. For I've come to call not those who, and I love again the way the New Living Translation says this, not those who think they are righteous or have it all together, but I've come to call those who know they are sinners. You know who the sinners are in this room? Man, every single one of us. We are all in the same boat here at Hope City. See, think about this. Jesus is the only human to walk this planet and not sin. He's the only human that doesn't carry the brokenness that we all just looked at on that survey. But he also chooses to sit across the table from people like you and me and call us friends. He sits across the table and doesn't sit in judgment. Instead, he goes, I'm going to offer healing to you. I'm going to show you mercy. What he doesn't want is for us to do more religious stuff to make up for our sin. He doesn't want us to try to rebuild our own lives. Why? Because broken things can't rebuild themselves. It takes someone greater. It takes Jesus. See, doing stuff to make up for our sin and just trying to do more good or be good enough, that's actually called self-righteousness. Have you heard people describe Christians as self-righteous before? What that means is it means that we think we can make up for our own sin, or we start comparing to other people's sin and we go, man, at least I don't sin as bad as they sin, and it just becomes this rock-throwing contest where we all try to one-up each other, right? And so that's the problem with the Pharisees, and let's be honest, that's the problem with church people. And I'm pointing at myself right now because if I'm being honest, I can be a Pharisee often. I can think I have it all together. I can look good for people. In fact, I've spent most of my life in church up to this point thinking that's what church was all about, to show up and look good for you all, right? But here's the reality. Doesn't mean that there's not sin and brokenness there, right? I can try to cover it and hide it, and I think I do that, man, maybe really well at times. And I can point out other people's sins with the best of them, but here's the problem. Hiding sickness, we know this, hiding sickness doesn't take it away, does it? Hiding sin doesn't take away our sin. Hiding brokenness doesn't rebuild anything. According to Jesus, the only way is acknowledging it, bringing it out into the open, and asking him to be the doctor, the physician that can heal us in only the way that he can. Jesus continues on in verse 16, and he says, besides, who would patch old clothing with a new cloth? For the new patch would shrink and rip away from the old cloth, leaving an even bigger tear than before. And no one puts new wine into old wineskins, for the old wineskins would burst from the pressure, spilling the wine and ruining the skins. New wine is stored in new wineskins, so both are preserved. And so what Jesus is getting at here, in this culture, they would have had leather wineskins that they would put wine in. And as wine aged, it expanded, stretching the skins. And so if you would fill an old wineskin with new wine, it would burst and the wine would go out everywhere. So what Jesus is saying is, look, the old version of you, the broken life that you've lived up to this point, it can't hold the new life that I want to create in you, that I want to rebuild within you. I want to do something entirely new. Or how about this? I don't want to just patch over the whole of your life. I want to give you a whole new life. It's not enough, Jesus would say, to repair it. It needs to be rebuilt entirely from the ground up. So how's this work? Well, 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 21, it's one of my favorite verses in the Bible. It's what we just talked about last weekend on Easter. It says that God made him, Jesus, who had no sin, when he hung on the cross, to be sin for us. To literally take on all of our sin, our brokenness, to be broken for stuff he never did. So that in him we might become what? The righteousness of God. The righteousness of God. And what we talked about a few minutes ago with baptism, that's literally what you are expressing when you're baptized. You're saying, Jesus, I'm broken and I need you to rebuild my life. I have sin that I can't take away. And when I go under the water, I'm sharing in your death and burial to my old life, and I'm coming up and signifying a raising of a new person, a new way of life, a life that only you can rebuild. Others of you, you may take a step here in a few weeks. I'd love to challenge you if that's you and you need that life. Man, in a few weeks, sign up for baptism weekend. Fill out that Connect card. But others of you might go, man, I need to get off the sidelines because I've been playing it safe for too long. I want to be the type of person and the type of community, the type of people that makes Hope City a safe place for my friends walking in here. I want to help make this a hospital for sick people. I want to help make this a place where broken lives are being rebuilt. And so if you don't know where to start, starting point is your starting point. There's your dad joke for the weekend, all right? But you can fill out that Connect card as well. You can go online and register for Starting Point. We would love to help you take a step in making Hope City that type of community. But again, I talked about this a few minutes ago. Jesus does something really cool when he rebuilds our lives. Often a rebuilt life comes with a name change. So Levi is now Matthew. Matthew identifies himself as Matthew. And you know what Matthew means? It means gift of God. Gift of God. I mean, imagine to think of yourself as a gift of God. I don't know where Matthew's name change took place. I don't know when this shift happened, but I can tell you, Scripture doesn't record it, but I can tell you what I think. So this is my opinion, all right? But it's based on what I see Jesus do in other people's lives. I think that this tape of Levi had been playing through Matthew's head for so long, and it represented a feeling of shame and brokenness, guilt, not being enough. And Jesus goes, no. You're not Levi anymore. From now on, I'm rebuilding you, and I'm giving you a brand new name. You're going to be known as Matthew, a gift of God from this point on. And that's the same thing that Jesus offers to us here today. And here's the reality. Matthew, as Jesus rebuilt his life, he went on to live out that name, to become a gift of God to the world. What I love about this story is that think about this, if Jesus doesn't call Matthew, if he doesn't go to his house, if he doesn't become friends with those sinners, if he doesn't rebuild Matthew's broken life, we wouldn't even be reading this story. If Matthew had to clean himself up or get it all together before he came to Jesus, we would not have this story in the Bible because Matthew couldn't rebuild himself. He was broken, and broken things don't rebuild themselves. You don't have a book of Matthew if Jesus doesn't go to Matthew. And man, aren't you glad that Jesus came for sinners and broken people like Matthew and like you and me here? Me too. So you might be wondering, Adam, what does this have to do with the church? Man, everything, because the church is not for people who think they have it all together. It's a place for people who know that they are sick to find healing. It's a place for people who know that they are broken to be rebuilt. It's a place where someone who is hurting can come in here and somebody puts their arm around you and they go, hey, I'm going to show you mercy. I'm not going to just go through the religious motions. I'm going to show you mercy, and together we're going to walk towards Jesus and let him rebuild our lives together. I've been through that. I've walked that struggle, or maybe I've never been there. I can't even imagine what you're going through right now, but Jesus is rebuilding my life too, so guess what? We are all in the same boat, and I'll get in that boat with you. See, here's the takeaway for today. This church is a community where broken people are being rebuilt. This church is a community where broken people are being rebuilt because every one of us, whether we've been following Jesus for a long time or we're just hearing about him for the first time, man, we are in need of healing. And it's not because of what we have done, but it's because of what Jesus is doing on our behalf. And so to help us get our heads and our hearts around this, I'm going to pass those, or I'm not going to do it. We have people that are going to do it. We're going to pass those papers back out. And this time, you're going to have somebody else's paper in your hand. If you get your own, don't be like, Adam, I've got my own paper, because then you've just outed yourself, okay? Just go with it, all right? And Austin, can I get one of those papers as well? See, because of Jesus, it's safe to have raw honesty before God and before each other. See, the church is a community where you don't have to hide anymore. It's a community where you don't have to pretend you have it together, regardless of what got you to the spot of brokenness you find yourself in. So let's just commit to this. Let's stop trying to hide. Let's stop trying to pretend like we're not dealing with stuff. Let's just acknowledge it. And the promise that Jesus gives us on the other side is that there's healing, that there's rebuilding, that there's a whole new life available to us on the other side, because the church is a community where us, broken people, are being rebuilt. And so that paper in your hand now is someone else's paper. And if it's yours, just go with it, right? But if there's a yes on your paper, we're going to walk back through these questions. And if there's a yes, I'm just going to ask, would you be willing to stand to represent that person in this room? Would you be willing to stand to let them know, hey, I'm not alone. They're not alone in their struggle and what they're going through. My guess is you probably know that there's other people going through stuff, but sometimes it's just good to get a visual representation of it. And I've got a paper too, and one of you is representing me. So thank you for standing to represent my stuff in this moment and remind me that I'm not alone. And I'll just raise my hand if whoever's paper I have has a yes on it. So let's just walk through this together, all right? Have you ever found yourself struggling with fear, anxiety, depression, or other mental health battles? If there's a yes on your paper, would you stand up? It's a yes for this person. Look around real quick. It's almost every single one of us in here. We are all going through this battle together. We are all in the same boat. Sit down. Do you have anything in your life that you regret or you're constantly ashamed of? If you have a yes on your paper, please stand up. You're not alone. Sit down. We're going to go deep here, okay? Have you ever thought about or have you ever intentionally harmed yourself? Would you stand if there's a yes on your paper? Take a look around real quick. Have a seat. Have you ever thought about or attempted suicide? Would you stand if there's a yes on your paper? Represent somebody in this room. You're not alone. You're not alone, and you matter, all right? You're here on purpose and for a purpose. There's a reason you're standing or sitting in this room right now. And Jesus wants to rebuild the part of your life that you feel like that it can't be. All right? And if you need to talk with somebody, if you need to know that this is a safe place, there's a whole bunch of other people that are going through what you're going through right now. And I'll be back at the response area. Come have a conversation. If you want to be anonymous, fill out that Connect card, and I'll follow up with you this week. But please know you are not alone in what you're going through. There's a whole bunch of people in this room, and there were a whole bunch of people last gathering that have been right there with you. You matter, okay? Have a seat. Have you ever struggled to honor God in your sexuality or dating relationships? If there's a yes, stand up. What are we trying to hide around the church anymore, right? It's every single one of us. We've all been there. Have a seat. Do you have any secrets you've never shared with anyone? If there's a yes, stand up. Have a seat. Some of you, this is the best workout you're going to get all week, all right? So we're just going to keep rolling. Do you have anything in your life that you haven't been able to quit doing? If there's a yes, stand up. Wow. Have a seat. Have you ever abused drugs or alcohol? If there's a yes on your paper, would you stand to represent that person? Yeah. Again, you're not alone in what you're working through. Have a seat. Do you struggle with attractions, temptations, or thoughts that you know are outside God's will for your life? If yes, will you stand to represent that person? Man, it's almost all of us, right? Have a seat, and I didn't raise my hand on that one, but... And then, last one, have you ever lied to someone in an effort to hide your actions? If yes, stand. Yep, same here. Have a seat. I'm going to ask you to do it one more time, all right? And this is for you. You're answering for yourself. Is there anyone in here that goes, man, I'm dealing with spiritual sickness, I'm dealing with brokenness, and I need Jesus to heal me and rebuild my life? If that's you, would you be willing to stand? Man, look around real quick. That's every single one of us, right? we are all in the same boat around here. This church, Hope City Church, because of the step you all were willing to take today, the risk you were willing to take, we are a community where it is safe to know that you are not alone in what you're going through. It's safe to bring all your stuff in here, and you can work through it. You get to experience Jesus doing what only he can do because you're broken, and you can't rebuild yourself. Only Jesus can do that, right? Only Jesus can do that. And since he walked out of the grave, that rebuilding process means that anything is possible. So Hope City, you took a big step today to experience that truth. So let's come back next week and let's dive into what it looks like to be rebuilt for boldness, to start living this out together in community and letting other people know around us, man, you are not alone. Hope is for everyone. We are all in the same boat. Let me pray. So God, you're so good. And I just thank you that before you, Jesus, it actually is safe to have raw honesty. To go, man, this is where I am, this is what I'm working through, this is what I'm walking through, this is what my life has looked like up to this point, or where I am currently, or where I'm going to go tomorrow. And Jesus, you offer the same opportunity to every single one of us in this. You offer healing, you offer rebuilding, you offer a whole new life. And so, Jesus, I pray right now that you would allow the person that walked in here today and they're going, man, I feel alone, to know that they're not. Would you allow the person who walked in here today to go, man, I think I've got my stuff together, just to go, I don't. And Jesus, you're rebuilding me just like the person down the road from me. And would you make us the community in the church, Jesus, that you intend us to be, a place where broken lives are being rebuilt in a way that the world gets to see you, Jesus. We love you and thank you for this time together this morning. It's in your name we pray. Amen.